Welcome to a fireside chat on enterprise transformation. My name's Miriam McLemore, and I'm an enterprise strategist with AWS. Prior to joining AWS, I was the corporate CIO at the Coca-Cola Company. We are thrilled to have some time with you today as executive advisors. That is the role we play as enterprise strategists, and we have the great privilege to talk to customers around the world and help them with their journey in adopting cloud and transforming their business. With me today, I have two of my colleagues. Wesley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Miriam. I'm Wesley Story, also an enterprise strategist. And most recently, I was the America CIO at Cisco, the food distributor. And as you can imagine, this theme of enterprise transformation is a pretty, transformational theme, to say a poor word. But it's one of those things that's pervasive in the industry, I think. It was pervasive then, it's still pervasive now. And what's interesting about it is, as we've done our own proprietary research, but also continue to read research that's out there from a number of different consultancies and research firms, every C-suite now, it's not just a few, every C-suite has a digital transformation agenda in some way. The interesting thing, though, is many aren't getting the results that they expect. So I think part of the conversation we might have today is tying that theme together, but also connecting the dots with some of the meetings that we have with executives, to your point. To that end, maybe Ishit, could you introduce yourself and talk about those trends?
Sure, excited to be here and explore the topic of transformation with both of you. My name is Ishit Vajrajani. I'm also an enterprise strategist. Before joining AWS, I was the global CTO for the media company A&E Networks that owns brands like History Channel. As part of my role, I was tasked to transform a legacy broadcast-based business and take that into a digital direct-to-consumer business. And so as you can imagine, digital transformation came up very often in different contexts. But as I think about and look back at conversations that we are having as a team with customers, and we talk to some of our largest customers across all industries, our team speaks with around 1,200 customers every year. The key themes that are emerging and would love to dive deep with you on is agility and innovation. When people talk about digital transformation, they want to know about how can they increase business agility and be more innovative. The people and culture side of it, how do they address and transform their entire organization? And then the third part is how do they use data to really drive outcome and transform their business. I think those are three key themes that I hear more often than others. Would love to get your thoughts on that. Miriam, I know you talk to a lot of customers about agility and innovation. What does that mean? When customers ask us about agility and innovation, what are they trying to achieve?
Yeah, it is absolutely a subject that comes up constantly. And I think part of it is getting under this topic of digital transformation. And so they're saying, okay, that has not a lot of meaning. And so it comes down to, I want to be able to drive faster decisions in my organization, respond to market opportunities, respond to threats, respond to challenges like we've had in this pandemic, right? Get my teams moving, looking at digital technology that could actually drive new lines of business, new value for the organization. Sometimes it is just about optimization, right? It's about finding ways to lower costs, and certainly cloud enables you to optimize costs. You only pay for what you use. We all know that. But the other aspect I do think is resiliency. If the pandemic's taught us anything, is the importance of resiliency in the market in which we're working today. So those are some of the themes that I wind up talking to customers about. And then, it's, as you said, industry by industry, it's slightly different. The data is slightly different. The cultural transformation is slightly different. But all the topics that you mentioned certainly are key to my discussions. Wesley, you and I were talking earlier, and you do a lot of culture, people, skilling conversations. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing I would add is that, a close second to the agility and innovation part is usually people. And I think it's fair to say that any organization is not an organization without its people. So there's a fundamental starting block there to me. But more importantly, you have to start to think about what are the behavioral changes you're shifting or trying to pursue as you go through this transformation. Are there new skill sets that you need to acquire or develop in your organization as you try to do this? And therefore reskilling, upskilling, all those types of conditions are things that executives are always thinking about and contemplating. Many large-scale organizations, as you guys all know, might have managed services or significant outsourcing. So now you're balancing those things from a people perspective of how am I actually going to get the work done? Am I partnering, with an external party, or am I going to do this work internally, or some combination in between, which is often the case, right? And lastly, what I'd mention is when you think about people, the change aspect of people is one of the hardest parts because we're all human beings, so to speak, right? And we've got patterns and habits.
Just so to speak?
Yeah, and behaviors. We've got all those things, right? But the change aspect, which you've had a lot of experience with, is probably one of the bigger things. You want to talk about change?
Yeah, I do think getting the culture right. I mentioned, these conversations about innovation. It's getting a culture that is willing to accept failure, that can look at the opportunities differently and not in, silos and, my hierarchy and what I can control. And so changing culture so you can get access to data as one thing, right? That's the miracle, right, of our future for enabling AI and ML and all sorts of consumer and customer insights, but often is locked up because of culture or organizational boundaries. Is that something you see?
Absolutely. I think when people talk about data, they talk about data being in silos. And they're often not system silos as we typically think about. They're really the departmental and organizational silos that are guarding those system silos. And that's more difficult to overcome. And that's where building a data-driven culture, building that culture that drives for innovation and change is so critical. When I talk to executives about data, majority of the time, the challenges are not around the volume and variety of data and things that are technical in nature.
Right.
They are mainly around cultural. How do I get the organization to actually start using data to make decisions? How do I get people, department functions to relinquish the control of the data and allow more people to build models based on that data?
Right.
So I think data-driven culture is such a big part of the digital transformation. I have a mental model that I use of 4 E's.
Yep.
Starts with engagement. And when I say engagement, it's the executive engagement. We hear a lot about sponsorship, that executives have to sponsor change, but I think it has to be beyond the sponsorship. It's about visibly engaging in that change, leading from the front. The second is education, data literacy being the big topic, but it has to go beyond that, where you're building this education across all the teams, not just teams with data science or analytics in the role. And then enabling frontline action. We hear about democratizing access to data, but it's about democratizing decisions and actions based on that data. And then the final piece is eliminating those silos that you talked about from a culture standpoint. So that's how I think about data. And it's a big change, but I think it's also a tremendous opportunity.
I also think that experimentation might possibly be a fifth
50,
E. Yeah, right? Because one of the things about data that I think we used to get wrong is the notion that you had to plan everything out in advance, right? That you had to think about every business question that the business needed to have answers to, therefore build a data model that reflects that. That ends up taking significant amounts of time, a lot of architectural, effort, and then you start to build. and only 18 to 36 months later, hopefully it's more on the 18-month side, but it could be as long as 36 months in some of the old traditional data platforms we'd build, then you start to get results. But I think in the modern world, Ishit, and you spend a lot of time in this, I'll kind of volley it back to you a little bit, is experimentation is actually one of the breakthrough capabilities we see a lot of organizations venturing into, right?
Absolutely. I think often when you start data forward, right, to say, well, let me get a whole bunch of data and build a data lake to nowhere.
Yes.
And then figure out what I'm going to do with it. Instead, actually flip it and work backward from an outcome or a customer problem, and then build a hypothesis. You may be wrong, but build a hypothesis, collect some data, run some analytical models, solve a real business problem using the data, and then pivot. So I think data-driven experimentation is certainly a great thing to do, and I think it's a good addition to the 4E model with the 5th E.
I think it is, and one other thing I'd add to that experimentation, to democratize experimentation, you have to accept some failure, right? If I'm actually going to experiment, right, I have to have a culture that is willing to learn from what didn't work and the insights that did not drive the right behaviors or the right decisions. And that, I do find, is one of the hardest things for companies to actually implement in their culture when they're trying to be innovative and they're trying to do experimentation.
I agree, and I think that's actually something that starts top down to an extent, right? Is we as executives have to model that behavior, and I think one of your E's kind of inferred that you've got to engage and show up in a different way as an executive. If you're expecting your organization to change, but you're not changing your underlying behaviors or your expectations of those folks that report to you, then you're not really going to get the results you expect. So I think that goes back. That's why the people, culture, agility, innovation, and data aspects come all together to me, is if you don't have the right culture and you don't have the right people that are empowered to actually execute these outcomes, you don't have a clarity of vision around the agility and innovation mission, and then, oh, by the way, if you're thinking about data in an antiquated way, maybe I'll say it that way, then you might not get the results you're expecting.
And I think the time that we are in, I mean, why are we talking about it now, right? And I think this is where cloud has fundamentally changed our ability to experiment very quickly.
Absolutely.
Get access to capabilities that we did not have available when we started out our journeys as leaders, right? Think about machine learning capabilities to look at petabytes of data and actually build something and create customer experiences. That's the reason we are talking about it now, because it's within the reach of every company. It's about the will and the desire of the leadership to change.
I completely agree in your point of within the reach of every company. Cloud, the ability to spin up and get access to the level of storage and compute to crunch these models and use models that have already been created that are available to you. So you don't have to hire an army of data scientists to actually begin that journey. It does make a world of difference than when we were doing the heavy lifting and building big box data warehouses.
Absolutely.
And one thing I'll add is now as Amazonians, there's benefits to the culture here that I think other organizations can copy, right? There's notions like one-way door and two-way doors. Maybe it should, I know we all do the culture of innovation conversation quite a bit, but tell me your opinion on some of these cultural attributes, right, that Amazon has that other companies might want to copy to allow them to accelerate their efforts.
Yeah, I think, every company has their own unique culture. What is important, though, is that it has to go beyond what is on the walls or your intranet, right?
That's right.
It has to actually be put in action every single day. And I think that's the great thing about what I've seen at Amazon, is that we don't only have our leadership principles, but we also have mechanisms and organization structure and the underlying architecture that supports it. So I think any company that is trying to drive that change has to think about what are the tenets, what are the transformation principles that you're going to sit behind, and then how are you going to create mechanisms that allow leaders to manage and lead beyond their line of sight, right? So the whole company can adopt that. And then support that with right organization structure and the technology and the architecture and the choices that you have with cloud.
Yeah, 100% agree. And those cultural elements coming here after a long career in one culture, right? I was coming into this environment really as a student of the culture, because after you've worked for 30 plus years, you're not going to go work somewhere where you don't like the culture, right? And it is so refreshing here to constantly be focused on driving customer value, that the company and our solutions are focused on what takes friction out of the customer's business, our relationship, the technology, and that, for me, coming from a consumer products company that was focused on consumers, coming to a customer-centric company, was a fit. And I completely agree with you. It takes not just having a value statement. You have to have the mechanisms, the architecture, and the organization that make those live. And it is unique in different companies and different customers. But I do often think, what would I have taken back to my career before? What would have been valuable? And one of our leadership principles, other than the one-way door, two-way door, that really sticks out to me is this concept of disagree and commit. So it is an idea that we want to hear your thoughts, we want to hear your opinions, we want you to disagree, but once we decide, speed matters. And so commit, because we're going, get in the boat. Don't be dragging alongside and slowing us down. And so that, I think, would speed, right? We're talking about agility and innovation and cultural change. Speed matters.
And there's things that back that up. Not to say that the Amazonian culture is the end-all, be-all, and it's perfection, because when we do our culture of innovation sessions, we always tell people, it's like, look, this works for us. We're not trying to say it's the best thing in the world, but it works for us. And we've got a track record there. But one of the mechanisms, I guess, that we have around that is how you make decisions with data sufficiency. A lot of organizations wait, I've been in this situation where you're trying to wait for all the data to come in so you can actually make the decision. That might take an extra few weeks because now you got to run more reports or gather data that wasn't instrumented to be collected before. But if you think about it from a perspective of, look, you need to make that decision when you've got 60 to 70% of the data, not waiting for the final.
Goes back to speed matters.
Speed matters, exactly. And also, one thing I was going to call out, Miriam, that you were talking about earlier, and hopefully you're okay with this, is there are patterns, I think, that organizations can reuse over and over again, regardless of the culture. So if you might be out there today thinking, I don't have this culture, how can we drive this agility and innovation? Well, sometimes, going back to the experimentation note, you've had success in your previous life of trying to incubate new ideas. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. Often the question is, how do I get started? How do I begin? And so finding some use case that is important and impactful for your business that you can then experiment with, demonstrate the impact that, whether it's data, whether it's a new technology, whatever, getting a use case that is visible and impactful to your business begins to get people excited about what's possible and get in the boat with you and head down this path.
That's so important, is to pick something that you said is impactful and visible. I would add two things. Relatable, that people, your rest of the company can align around and say, I understand that. And then the fourth piece is pick something where you can take advantage of all the new capabilities that cloud has to offer that you did not have before. And that becomes a way to build that flywheel of transformation, because you can start there, show some value, and then off you go with the next idea. Thank you, Miriam and Wesley. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It was great.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Yeah. It's always fun to hang out, especially in the new EBC.
I know. This is our new executive briefing center, so please, we want customers to come see us. Very cool.
Absolutely. And there are more resources online as well. You can go check out aws.amazon.com/enterprise, and there are more articles, thought leadership material, ebooks, and many resources to help you with your transformation journey. Thank you.